Welcome to Catholic Education Matters, the podcast that celebrates the beauty of Catholic education, highlighting excellence in academics, athletics, and the transformative power of faith. Join us as we share the stories of those making a lasting impact on Catholic education. Let's begin. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Catholic Education Matters. My name is Troy Van Vliet. I am the Foundation Board Chair for St. John Paul II Academy, the newest Catholic high school in the Vancouver Archdiocese and in the Lower Mainland here in British Columbia. And I am here today with the infamous Tom Cooper, a friend. I call him a friend. He might not call me a friend just yet, but
we'll see.
I call him a friend. Founder of City in Focus and ex-pastor for the Presbyterian Church. Recently just turned Catholic, and or fairly recently anyway. So we've got a lot of fun stuff to talk about today regarding Catholic education and fundraising and all of the many broad different topics that we can cover. So
great.
We'll have to try and keep it down to a dull roar here in terms of time. I think we could probably talk for days.
Yeah.
But Tom, welcome.
Thank
you for coming. Thank you.
It's a privilege to be here. I'm very fond of the new school being built and the strategy in which is building it and who it's for. So I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, it's an exciting time. Yes,
Yeah.
we have a picture of it in the background there, just a rendering. It's we are going to be open in September of 2020. Well, this year. I've been saying 2025 for so long. You know, down the road we're going to be open, but
it's quite exciting.
We're now in the year that the new campus will be open. So Tom, tell us a little bit about City in Focus, and a little bit about also you coming over to the Catholic faith too, which is I think a great story as well.
Well, City in Focus, basically the history of City in Focus, why it got started was how somewhere between how I grew up, how I worked, and what I saw the needs were. I grew up my father was very wealthy, and I remember walking by his desk and seeing a personal letter from John Kennedy. He ran a large company in New York. I was then allowed to go to a private school, and that's rarefied air in New England. We lived on a private island. You had to get stopped, and they had to call up to let your car come through to go up. I had a lot of wealth and privilege. I saw it up close. Then I was in business, and I also saw it again from business leaders who I worked with in my company that I was joined with another person. It was an advertising company. So I think part of that experience is just watching people and relationships. And I realized that, and I had somewhat of a faith in some of this, and I realized that they were just as marginalized and just as needy as anyone. We used to call them the up and outers. And so my church experience was I used to see a lot of the church not doing very well with the unchurched. So City in Focus was kind of like an opportunity to deal with a wider community, right? And if someone used to say it's a hackneyed phrase, but you want to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. That's kind of what I do, and that's good. And I am on the point with 90% of British Columbia doesn't even go to church. So most of my world are the unchurched world. And so our tagline, care for the soul of the city. And I think if I could say it in a nutshell, Frederick Buechner, who's an author and writer and Christian, said, when the world has a great need and you find great joy meeting that need, then you know the hand of God is upon you.
Wow. And
that's exactly, I am right where I need to be and want to be.
Yeah.
And I feel like, and it's the unchurched, that is probably why City in Focus works. Those are some of the tenets that got me launched into it.
Right.
Okay. The Catholic side, if you want me to jump to that for a
Sure. Yeah. No, I'd love to hear.
And it dovetails a bit with philanthropy, but we'll start with the fact that the public school we moved to Point Grey was not particularly good, so I got my first son into OLPH, Our Lady of Perpetual Help, and then my next son got in because the first son was in. We were Protestants. I had no Catholic faith, and then my daughter went. So my first experience was that, but I had had experiences with the Catholic Church. When I was in university, I was working with youth, and a Catholic priest hired me to work with all the youth in his diocese, though I'm not a Catholic. And I lived in a remodeled convent with 2 nuns and a priest.
Oh, wow.
And that was an amazing story to understand, watch how they really worked, how they prayed. But that was a very good experience. Sister Rosari was a remarkable human being and full of joy. That's when I started reading certain books about the Catholic faith, because I didn't understand it.
How old would you have been then?
18. No, 19
Oh,
and
wow.
20.
Okay.
And 20. And that was very helpful for me. And then I pretty much was involved in youth work and church work. I dropped out of all of that. I was your typical hippie, because in my generation, hippies were predominantly children of the wealthy or the upper middle class. They could afford to be hippies. They could tune out. They could drop out of school. They had resources. And that's pretty much my story. And then my faith odyssey came back in. But the Catholic Church didn't really go on the horizon for me until I was going to a church in Vancouver when we moved years ago in 1988. And I started seeing split after split in the Protestant world.
Right.
And I finally just looked at myself one day and I said, I think I'm going to try something else. And I remember Sister Rosari, and I remember the Catholic community at OLPH. So I just drove up to St. Mark's College at UBC and parked, St. Mark's Parish, and parked. And I started going there. And I went I've gone the last 20 years.
Wow.
And then through that, I got tied to different causes, because the Catholics have great charities. I help charities that are Catholic and Protestant, but I started working with Archbishop Roussan, and because the Olympics was coming, and City in Focus was asked to be the head of all Christian work for the Olympics of 2010. We had 1,100 churches. We had over 100 nonprofits, and we put Catholic leaders. Barb Dowding, Vice Chancellor, she was on the executive committee, and I was introducing Barb to the head of Campus Crusade for Christ, who never met a Catholic. But for me, it's always been both and, neither are. I don't think binary with the kingdom. I think everyone. And I watched, and then the Archbishop jumped in. Roussan signed off on it, and then Miller signed off, and they were donors to help the Olympics and participants all the way. So that kind of got me into that. Then I met Archbishop Roussan a bit more, and then I had a conversation. My one lunch, I had a joint lunch with him, and I went, Lord, Tom, you're a Protestant having lunch with 2 archbishops. But what it got me thinking about is how I could help them. And so City in Focus started just doing philanthropic work with them, right? And someone said to me, he said, how'd you get involved? I said, there are several people in the world that you just know that you have to help them. You don't have to really worry about it. The answer is yes. I remember years ago, Sister Elizabeth, she was in the East Vancouver with the sisters of, what were they called? They finally retired, but they were sisters that had been 50 years in East Van. One of them, Sister Elizabeth, in her 80s, did all the marches, quite radical. And one day I get a phone call, and my assistant says, is Sister Elizabeth's on the phone? And I said, yeah, okay. Hi, Sister Elizabeth. She said, hi, Tom. I never talked to her on the phone. I've been at meetings with her. And she said, we were broken into last night, and immediately that you're being called by a nun. It doesn't really matter what the issue is. You are going to say yes. And then she started walking through. The door was broken down. The lock was broken. They broke into the cabinet. They stole all the toothpaste, all the hand. She went on for 10 minutes. And I said, well, sister, that's terrible. How can I help? Well, I would wanting to know if you could give us money to reimburse all that and fix the door. I said, of course. And I said, so how much do you need? Well, it's a lot of money, Tom. And I said, and she said, it's $370. And I hung up and said, thank you, God. Yeah. And I said to the sister, the check is literally in the mail. Yeah. But I started watching how Catholics worked with the poor and the needy. And I watched how they helped me. I was financially way behind financially. And I remember going to Father David at OLPH. And I said, I cannot afford the second kid coming. And he just waved his hand and said, do not worry about it. I never, ever forgot that. In fact, it laid in me deeply. And years later, when I did well, I sent a significant check to the school, and someone called me and said, "We don't know who you are. We don't know who City and Focus is." I said, "You don't need to know." He said, "What do we do with this?" I said, "It goes in your bursary funds because years ago, people I don't know helped my kids go. So I'm helping kids I don't know." But it was a one more example. And Archbishop Miller told me years later, many lay non-Catholics end up in the Catholic community because their children were allowed to go.
Yeah.
And I think we need to remember that when we have Catholic schools,
Yeah.
not to be so truncated by isolating only Catholics. So anyway, over time, meeting nuns, working with Archbishop Miller in Philanthropy, I did a lot of work with him, working with community leaders. We would meet with all the heads of all the heads of people that ran denominations. It could be Mennonite, it could be Baptist, it could be Lutheran, Anglican. But we would convene meetings, and I would go with him, and I watched how he interacted. And over time, going to church there, watching him interact, it was very helpful for me because I slowly started understanding what the Catholic community was.
Wow.
So, and then over time, I had good friends of the Jesuit community, and I just slowly got more and more inclined, and I finally decided a little bit over 3 years ago to become a Catholic.
Wow. So you were involved with the church for a long time, with the Catholic
many
Church
years.
For a long time.
I raised lots of money for the Catholic Church, and I was a Protestant. But I always raised for things that were helpful.
Yeah.
For example, there was a need to have the College of the Department of Engagement at St. Mark's. I got together a buddy of mine who is well off, and we also wanted to help. So I helped. I got a couple other guys together, and collectively they gave $2 million to launch that at St. Mark's. And then we wanted Jimmy Crescenzo, who's a Christian that works, and he'd be a great interview. He works with kids. He's worked for kids for 30 years and won every award in Canada on teaching. And he had kids that couldn't afford to go to school. So we had an event. Michael Ledane was interviewed, and we raised $300,000 to help low-income kids go to school at St. Mark's. And people respond to that.
Yeah.
And Jimmy's kids stood up and talked about their lives, and people said, "Yeah, we want them." So now they go. They go for 2 years free, and then they transfer to Sauter School. We don't really care.
Yeah.
But it's giving them hope. So those are all things that, and I was doing all this as a non-Catholic. I just wanted to see it done.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Wow. So what we're kind of, I'm digging into this here a little bit further, but
that's okay.
what tipped you over the edge in terms of actually wanting to be, you were doing all these wonderful things. You were
Right. What
Protestant,
tipped me
you
over
were
the edge?
Man of the faith, and then you thought,
Well,
I know you were close with Archbishop Miller.
Yeah.
And
close with Father Rob, who's a Jesuit. I think what tipped me over is there are issues in all of our families, and there are issues that stretch us. And we have, if we're honest, if we go back long enough and deep and wide enough, we come into real challenges of the families. And it could be mental health, it could be physical, it could be who knows. But when this really intensified, part of me said I needed to quit floating. I needed to anchor in. And that's what finally made me jump in. And my son had become a Catholic, and daughter-in-law had become a Catholic, and my grandchildren. And so I think it was a time of life. I had been going for 17 years.
Yeah.
I was so glad the Archbishop Miller didn't say to me when I told him, "Well, it's about time." Very gracious guy. Anyway, but my point was, I think that was a cumulative thing of personal need, personal search, and sitting there for 18 years, 17 at the time, just listening to the Catholic community and the social justice and the need and the family care. And I think collectively it brought me there.
Yeah. Wow. That's a great story. And I love hearing people's conversions or reversions back to the faith, which I quite talk about with me. I never left the Catholic Church. I was cradle Catholic.
Right.
Grew up in a great family, went to a Catholic high school. Between university and having kids, kind of floundered around a little bit.
Right.
Wasn't really, I was still sure of my faith, but it wasn't deep within me, you know, and as it should be, or as you would want it to be. And it was the kind of the start of this school that ended up bringing me back. I was surrounded by more Catholics, and the deeper. I guess you look for, you start off with school originally because, for selfish reasons, for your family, for your kids and things like that. And then you start seeing how many people are going to be affected by this. And then you start seeing how their lives are going to be affected by, their kids going to the school, and think, okay, there's a bigger need here.
There is. And I think I will say, I've said it to the Catholic community and I've said it to the Protestant community, when you trade the love of Christ, which is what drew us to him, for the laws of the church, you are dulling the witness to the unchurched without almost exception, because we were touched by generosity, love, forgiveness. Well, why wouldn't the world be touched by that?
Yeah.
Right. So that's one of the, that's one of the things City of Focus tries to do. We try to usher in, we want to listen and help them heal and point them. The word we use, and I think the founder of Regent College, who was an Oxford professor, used was, we are pilgrims. You and I and everybody in this city are pilgrims. Where are they on their pilgrimage? If the goal is ultimately to see God, which we believe is Christ, the Trinity, are we with them as fellow pilgrims, or are we standing and telling them? Right?
Yeah.
Right? And I think, wasn't it Peter, 1 Peter, that said, be ready at any time to give a reasonable account of the hope you have in you. Don't you tell them what they need. Don't you tell them, you tell them what it did for you.
Right.
Why do you have hope? Tom Cooper.
Yeah.
And quit preaching. Tell your story. And that often builds a bridge to hear their story.
Right.
If that makes sense. So that's kind of what that's part of the DNA of City in Focus.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Like, that's something that, the fact that you're faith-based, but you're reaching out to everybody is something to be admired, and it's being done right.
Well, you hope it
commended
is.
For that.
I will say one more thing. We when the pandemic came, everybody's calling me and saying, well, the Christians are saying, what are we doing, like the Olympics? Well, you have to chair this. No, I don't. No, yeah, you do, which I ended up doing. But when the pandemic came, what's the response of the Christian community? So I wrote a letter draft, and we sent it out. It was signed by 200 Christians. Every bishop in the province signed it. Bishops of Anglican, Jimmy Pattison, Santa Ono, all of them signed it, saying, we pray for you, we care for the city, and we encourage our community to volunteer. So someone said to me, that was a phenomenal letter. Someone liked the letter. It was a full page ad in the Sun and the Province.
Oh, really?
Fine, don't care. Anyway, someone said, well, how'd you write such a great letter? I said, I didn't. And they said, well, what did you do? I said, well, if you really want to know, I had 2 editors. I sent my draft to the Archbishop of British Columbia's diocese, and I sent the same draft to the president of Trinity Western University. And they both critiqued it. I took all their criticisms, and the letter was done.
Wow.
If that is what I believe. And what was interesting is both men were highly educated, highly biased to their own, and all of their suggestions were simple. You might consider, here's a thought, this might be a better. None of it was, and I just said, yep, I just took them all. So I think that is also what part of the DNA of City in Focus is, helping us work together, right?
That's amazing. I'm going to go back to something you said earlier on about bursaries. How you were the recipient of a bursary for your youngest son.
Yeah, and then daughter. And 2
daughter.
Kids. Yeah.
Wow. So, and you were compelled, you felt, to give back.
100%.
And long after.
Yeah.
Bursaries are important.
They're amazingly important. When the lawsuit came to, the First Nation lawsuit came to St. Thomas More and Vancouver College, which were tangentially connected to the religious order that went through the lawsuit. I think one school owed Thomas More, I think, owed $8 or $9 million, and VC or was out 10 or 11. So one of my friends called, and I'm in a Bible study with him, and he said, "Should I help St. Thomas More?" I knew with Peter Bull that the other side was going to be just fine.
Yeah.
And I said, "Yeah, you should, because you're Catholic at roots and you have a faith, but you raise a lot of money in what you do in business." So he called and signed up. It doesn't surprise me that he was chair within 6 weeks. He raised, and worked with Peter, he raised $9 million for that school. Then he stayed one more year and raised $10 million for the Science Center, and then he bowed out. And I asked him one day, I said, "Why'd you do this?" I just called, because he was Catholic. He said, "Well, because when I was young and my mom was poor, St. Thomas More gave me a bursary to go to school and help my mother. I never forgot." Now, the Bible says God is no man's debtor. Think about what happened because the school was not having blinders on about a single mom, or blinders on because maybe they didn't go to church all the time. They thought of a kid that could be in their school.
Yeah.
So I see that time and again. That's one of the motivations for me.
Yeah. That's
sure.
huge. That's huge.
Yeah.
Our founding principal for our school, Mich Delorier, taught me in high school when I was in grade 8, actually. And we were fortunate enough to get him when we were starting up the school.
Right.
We wanted to have a principal that with a ton of experience that could champion things right out of the
Right.
gate, and not a real attractive position to go and start a school from scratch as a
Right.
principal. Like
Right.
there's a lot of work because you've talked to him and he would say, "Yeah, I'm the janitor, I'm the principal, I'm a teacher, I'm the bus driver." He does everything,
right. All of it.
And for him to sign up for that in his later years of his career was huge. But one of the best things that he ever said, when we were setting up what our philosophy was going to be and what have you with the school, he said, "Troy, we never want to deny a family getting their kids a Catholic education for financial reasons."
Right, exactly.
And proudly we have stuck to that.
Right.
We didn't know how we were going to do it.
But you stuck to it.
Because there's money involved.
Right.
Like no matter what, we've got to pay for this. But we stuck to it. Yeah. And as you know, because you were a contributor to this too, we have a golf tournament every year now. We had our first annual alumni golf tournament. It's a very small alumni group we have right now. But
I was at the dinner. I got the best thing. I had a free lunch.
You had free lunch. Well, you sponsored it, so it wasn't 100% free.
Oh, okay.
You were
Fair
a
enough.
sponsor there, and thank you for that.
Yeah,
but,
sure.
Our golf tournament is to raise money strictly for our bursaries.
Yeah.
100% for our bursaries. And the same thing, we just had our first annual Royals Ball. 100% of the proceeds go. So when we raised over $250,000 for with those two events,
Wonderful.
just to go to the bursaries, because it's a big in our tuition. We don't have the same kind of funding that our the CISVA schools get, where the parishes chip in.
Yeah.
So we're a little bit more stand on our own.
You don't have government money.
And zero government
you're two
money.
steps back.
2 steps. So our tuition fees are a little higher than what we would like them to be, but we've got to pay for this facility. We've got to pay.
Right.
There's real costs involved. But yet, saying that, we're also telling families that are saying, "Well, we'd love to go, but we just can't afford it. It's not in our budget." We're saying, "Come anyway, apply anyway."
And
we'll
give
figure
what
out
you
a way.
can. It doesn't have to
give
be
what
zero,
you can.
but give what you can.
Give what you can.
And many people
will work it out.
Many people will give more than you thought they would once they know they can go.
Yeah.
Well, I can do $800 a month. Okay, we'll do
All
the
right.
rest.
Exactly.
What does it matter? But the point is,
whatever the number is.
Well, it's one of the reasons. To be honest, I'm happy to help your school a bit. Is I like the philosophy. I think bursaries are one of the signs of the kingdom's at work.
Yeah.
Right. And my kids went to St. George's. My boys with Dr. Crofton, and St. George's is very expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And a good friend of mine, lapsed Catholic, good friend of mine, I signed up, joined, had no money to pay for it. And one of my close friends said, "I'll pay their tuition." And he paid all of them. Wow. 5 years for each boy. And then I was in meetings with people because I knew half the crowd because of the city. And every time they say, "Well, we want the best boys," I said, "No, you don't.
Mm-hmm.
You want the wealthiest best boys. If you want the best boys, you got to get an endowment behind you, massive endowment."
Yeah.
And I think, and they've changed, right? They now can do it because they understand they want diversity, right?
Yeah.
And I think the Catholic school, if they can, I think bursaries are the coin of the realm. It builds gratitude by the parents. It builds future gratitude by kids who get changed, like my friend at St. Thomas. So there's no downside. It's a great idea.
Yeah.
And I think St. Mark's and Corpus Christi have started going that direction too. And I've helped raise a lot of money for them.
Right. Speaking of St. Mark's in Corpus Christi, can you tell us a little bit about that? Because shamefully, I don't know as much as I should. My daughter just started first year university at Catholic Pacific College at Trinity Western.
Oh, okay.
So Corpus Christi was a consideration as well. But first of all, there's the names of two colleges in the same vicinity.
Right.
There.
One's undergraduate, one's graduate.
Okay.
So St. Mark's College is deed is graduate school. Undergraduate is Corpus Christi.
Okay.
I think they're trying to figure out. Corpus Christi is an in-house word, if I could be so clear. Where St. Mark's is kind of right. And I know they're trying to figure out how this all works, but it's all. Yeah. But your question is, I think they. If I was giving what I have helped do is build bridges between the philanthropic community and kids getting bursaries. And it's interesting, a lot of people that aren't Catholics will still give to bursaries to help kids, right? They just will. So you have to create the opportunity.
Yeah.
And if I can be so blunt, if I can give any advice to a school like or your school, is my argument is you want to raise money, get out of the ghetto. So the first year we had a fundraiser for bursaries. We had it at a Italian restaurant in East Van that was also a place where you could dance and play jazz. So anyway, it was packed. And what was interesting, we asked Frank Juster to speak, and someone said, is he a Catholic? I said, I don't care. I want the unchurched to show up. They showed up in droves. The Christian community went because of the Catholic connection. The non-Christian community, they knew Frank. Right. And at the end of the day, when they were saying, what does it cost to have a kid go for 2 years, 25 grand, Frank said, I'm in. And boom, 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 boom around the room. Friends of Frank's raised their hand. Yep. And so Archbishop Miller wrote me and said, tell me, what were we doing there? And I said, well, Your Grace, it's called basically, I said, it's called philanthropic evangelism. And I said, here's why. And he wrote back and said, oh, okay. But he didn't, right? But then the next year, we asked Michael Ledane. Yes. And I said, no, you can't have it on campus. No, I'm going to go. So I went to an art gallery, which was across the street from Emily Carr. And I went to the gallery across it, and I said, I'd like to have your room and have a. And one of the St. Mark's people said, this will never work. I said, it will only work here. We sold out. Michael Ledane. And then when they heard that Michael Ledane was the speaker, he was a major donor to Emily Carr. We were given the auditorium free and the mic system. And then we walked across the lane to the dinner, and we raised $300,000. And again, it was packed with the unchurched. I have no desire to coddle the church. But I think the unchurched also need to be able to see this and have it need. So, and you just have to, but you're still correctly tilling the soil of those you already know, which is absolutely essential. Yeah. Right. But then on the other hand, as you get better, bigger and more sound, try something different. Right. That's all I'm saying.
Right. No, for sure. And as our community grows, it's not just the Catholic community that grows within our school. There will be many non-Catholics. We already have non-Catholics that are in the school today. It will grow in ratio with that as well. And,
exactly.
Exactly. Just before Christmas, we had Rick Diamond, who isn't a Catholic,
Jewish family,
and but what we're doing with our school resonates with him. And Rick has got a very generous heart.
He does.
And of course, he's got Rick's Heart Foundation, which he works with the homeless and the drug addicted in Vancouver. He drives that van around himself in the middle of the night. Like, what a guy. And So he's learned about our school and what we're doing and all of the wonderful things that we're and our outreach programs. I mean, my youngest daughter's in the at SJP too. She's in the sandwich club. And
good.
what does the sandwich club do? Well, they make sandwiches every week, and they go out to the homeless in our local White Rock community.
Good.
And the sandwiches go.
Good.
Which is one. And Rick, once again, he's stepped up as a non-Catholic, and he's pledged $1 million to go towards our theater, which is huge. And,
And it's a statement of width.
It is.
We'll get into that more, but the width is a Jewish community. I mean, another very wealthy Jewish family built the largest halfway house for women for Salvation Army. Jewish donor.
Oh.
They're engaged.
Yeah.
If you let them.
Yeah,
and
of
this
course.
guy, if I was giving you advice, which I guess I can because you can delete anything I say, is at the right time have him sponsor an event.
Yeah.
Up to you. Bring who you want. And what do you want us to talk about?
Yeah.
And then they get a letter, an email from him.
Yeah.
I've seen this is important. You will have an entirely different feel in that room.
Yeah.
Entirely different feel.
Mm-hmm.
But and he might do it over time as he sees the work.
Yeah.
But you want that. It's those events that draw in a wider net.
Yeah.
Right?
Amazing. He also wants to set up a thrift store that some of our students will work at.
Good.
And that the proceeds will go back to the school as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so the bursaries are huge.
Great.
They're massive.
They're
massive part
and
of the
it's
school.
also part of the kingdom, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So-
No, that it is. So, in St. Mark's and Corpus Christi, do you know what kind of numbers of students that are
I
going
don't.
through
I
there?
know.
Yeah.
I know that St. Mark's, Corpus Christi has really grown over the years.
Yes.
Really grown, and I don't know the total numbers, right? But I know that a lot of kids attend, and I know that, and if we think about it, the pandemic didn't shrink our net; it widened it.
Yes.
And so now of a sudden, and you might think about this down the road, now all of a sudden someone wants to take your school, we'll have them all videoed. And they live in a wheelchair and they're 1,000 miles north of here. What do you care? Mm-hmm. Have them take the class.
Yeah.
Hire someone to work with them and pay. And it's a little overhead, but the class, you have no idea. It's widening it out. And when I saw one of the comments in the Catholic Archdiocese, way before I was a Catholic, but when I saw that they were going to say, well, we need to get people back in church and stop the services, I wrote the senior management and said, nonsense. Use it. Keep it. Go visit them. Be in touch with them. You've been allowed a net of new people. Why would you truncate it back to, we're going to define a Catholic by coming in? You don't know where they are. They might be non-Catholics. But say, anyway, just
That's
the thought.
right. You've sponsored or produced or put on the prayer breakfast.
I do.
Over here in Vancouver. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, it was started, the prayer breakfast was started. The 1 minute summary is there's a guy named Abraham Verdi who was a Norwegian, committed Christian, and he decided to go to the United States at the age of 19. He landed in the Statue of Liberty, New York, made his way across the country, fell in love with a Pentecostal pastor's daughter, married her, and he moved to Seattle. And the basic argument of him was he felt called to be an evangelist. And he had his wife. And then over time, in Bible studies, over time, a very wealthy businessman, it would be the equivalent of someone who owned Hudson Bay, who knew him. And they, of course, they were coming out of the Great Depression. And this guy said, this guy Abraham said to this wealthy guy, you need to come to God. And he said, what do you want me to do? My friends also need Christ. And instantly Abraham Verdi knew his calling for life. Then this guy called a Bible study in the in the club in Seattle, Washington Athletic Club. It started with 18 people. Many said no. They read the Bible, had breakfast, talked about the Bible, what it meant to them, prayed for each other, gone in 1 hour. 3 years later, one of those people threw their hat in the ring, became governor. And so they went down to have breakfast with their good friend who was a governor. Started the first prayer breakfast in the state, in the United States, in Canada. Then more and more people, because he knew them, he started meeting senators and congressmen and philanthropists. And he worked his way across the country, and he's in some event welcoming President Eisenhower. And Eisenhower says, I want you to move to Washington, D.C. and do here nationally what you're doing there. And so he moved, and Hilton, who was a friend, said, I'll sponsor the breakfast. And the presidential prayer breakfast started right there. And you invite leaders. You don't invite spiritual-sided. You invite leaders and ambassadors and congressmen, and they've been going on for 60 years. So then they spawned them. And then you have an Ottawa prayer breakfast, and then you had an Alberta prayer, and it was started almost 60 years ago in British Columbia. And the whole goal of the breakfast is to have to invite the leadership and gently, you've been there, and gently encourage them to remember God in the midst of all they're doing. But it's really gentle. We're not trying. And the goal of that breakfast is to push out the extreme elements. I don't need them. They can come, but there's not there. Yeah. Right. And someone said, well, how do you know if it's a good breakfast? 1,000 people will show up. Yeah. More this year. And I said, the evangelicals will walk up and say, the speaker talked too much about Jesus in the Bible. No, didn't talk enough about Jesus in the Bible. Yeah. And then the non-evangelicals, the non-faith community walk up and say, too much about Jesus, Tom. And I went, I think we're right, kind of where we want to be.
Right in the middle.
Right in the middle. So the goal of the prayer breakfast is to facilitate the gathering of the group. Right. So at a certain point, you've come, and at a certain point you go, okay, I now get it. I'm going to bring major donors, a couple of secular buddies, and we're going to sit and enjoy the breakfast or the dinner. It doesn't really matter. So that's the DNA is that. And the reason it's the largest in the nation is that we have kept true to not being proselytizing. Right. You have prayer breakfasts in the British Columbia that are basically Christian rallies. Yeah.
Well, what's really nice about this is the word prayer is right in the name, and so people know they're coming there. Right. This is what this is about.
And there's a prayer.
And there's the prayer, and there's going to be. I got to lead one of those. The closing prayer.
You did. You did a good job.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that.
No, a really good job.
That's something I'm an advocate for. I encourage those that if you're contemplating going to definitely go to that.
Yeah, it's a good thing, and bring your MP or MLA. Yeah, the premier's always there.
That's a good idea.
Leader of opposition is always there.
Brent Chapman, you're on Brent Chapman, and he's our new MLA in.
He would probably come, and he will come. Is he MLA? Is he on the Liberal? Is he
conservative?
Yeah. Well, the deputy whip of the Senate is Senator Yona Martin. And she comes. Okay. And she does the reading for Parliament. And you know why I invited her? She doesn't have to be from a party. She just brings great. She's not introduced. Right. Senator Yona Martin. It doesn't say she's conservative or liberal. Yeah. She does not care. Yeah. That's great. Right? That's great. She stands up and brings greeting from Parliament.
I love it.
Why would I argue that?
Yes.
You get my point. Okay.
You also there's a dinner.
There's a dinner. And the dinner started 10 years ago. It allows the community to have more fellowship. And originally the dinner was set to informally meet some people. But the great thing about the dinner is there's hundreds of people and they start walking around and chatting. The breakfast is so surgically quick. Yeah. But the dinner allows them to, you can just watch them. It's like chaos, but good chaos. Yeah. And so we bring a speaker and they can be much more blunt about their faith in Christ. Yeah. It's more of everyone's invited, but it's a little more focused on faith. Okay. Yeah, it's great. Yeah, we've had everyone from the person who's the guy who was the professor who won the award with the AIDS vaccine, Montana, Julio Montana. And when he came, he handed out a letter that he had received from the Pope for all the work he had done for AIDS. Catholic background. That was kind of cool.
There you go.
Yeah, kind of cool. But you have them. You have Jay Kim. Yes. She worked for Frank Justra, who's a billionaire, 7 years. We interviewed her. What did you learn? And we did different people. Peter Ash, who was born albinoism. And Peter, he has been a major philanthropist in Tanzania because of the albinos there are killed or maimed for body parts. And he's given the last 10 years of his life by giving scholarships, lobbying, paying people to go to the outback and whatnot, and putting albino kids in school. And now it doesn't happen at all. He's won every award the world can give him for that. Wow. But his mother died on the streets of Halifax because she was mentally ill. So the three brothers, who now are all committed Christians, built Violet's Place for the hard-to-house women in East Van in her honor. Yeah, we have to remember. Yeah. I want to say one thing. You separate talking about it from modeling it. You are ineffective in your witness. It is the word and the deed together. Yeah. I was talking to a gal who was a prostitute, and I know it sounds cavalier, but it's the my world. And I said, how did you end up? She would not mind me using her name, but it doesn't matter. Yeah. We'll call her Sally. And I said, how did you end up coming to faith and leaving prostitution? Do you know what her answer was? She worked all nights, and up walks this Midwestern, blonde hair freshman from Trinity Western, and hands her a cup of coffee and chats with her. It's just know her. Does it every month for 6 months. Finally, this woman says, well, why do you do this? Oh, I go to Trinity Western, and we're asked, we can volunteer to come down and just hang out and feed and give coffee to people. Never talked about her faith. And finally, this woman said, well, why? And slowly that question led to her ultimately giving her life to Christ and leaving prostitution. And we think Jesus was not thinking about it when he said, give a cup of water. Yeah. No, he was thinking about it.
Yeah. He knew what he was talking about.
Right, yeah, exactly. And what's the old saying? When preach the gospel in season and out of season, and when necessary, use words. Yeah. We are drawn to the St. Francises of this world, naturally.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
There we go.
That's living it. That's
100%.
That's living the faith. That's living the faith.
How am I doing over there?
Fantastic.
Okay, well, you can cut me off anytime.
Well, not before we talk about another thing that seems it's almost counter.
The
Scotch event.
Okay, so the Scotch event.
We need to hear about that.
Okay, well, I go to a church that is run by Jesuits, and I'm always trying to think of I'm trying to think of, now you know me better. How would I get the unchurched there? Yeah. And how would I get the cross section of the church there? Well, I like Scotch, and someone said, well, you helped the St. Paul's in one of their divisions raise $1 million, something that they needed. Why? Oh, the guy who ran the program brought me a bottle of Scotch and asked. And my friend said, really, Thomas? Well, not right, but anyway, so having so many people I know that have like Scotch, I said, well, why don't we do it? And then I read that the National Jesuit organization has a Scotch dinner where they have dinner and have Scotch and they talk about their work. It's the big event for the Jesuits in Canada. I said, well, we can do a mini one. So then I asked Archbishop Miller, because I know him well, I said, can we use the big hall? And he said, of course. And so that's why we started. And then the fundraising aspect is kind of the fellowship is the perk. We have a British renowned person who knows Scotches who helps us pick them. But the point was, if we make money, it goes to these places, and they go to 3 Bursaries for St. Mark's and Corpus Christi. We help support spiritual work with students through the Jesuit work on campus, and we give money to the Vice President Francis Mazza is Vice President of the Department of Spirituality, Mission, and Ethics, and we give money to that. And this year we're giving it because they have seminars for all Christian leaders in the medical community in BC every couple of years, and we're helping that program. So that's why we do it. Then you were there, which was great to have.
I was there last year, and I got a ticket for this year as well.
I'm so thrilled.
Not just there for the Scotch. Well, kind of, but
well, and a lot of people don't drink Scotch. We said we don't care.
Yeah,
just pay. The spread is good, and have a glass of wine. And someone said, "Well, the wine's expensive." I don't care. Pay $50, have a glass of wine. Yeah. What we also want to make sure is if it's for everyone, a lot of people don't drink, and we want them to come. Right. And Archbishop Miller, it's kind of fun when he kind of walks in. And Wade's around for about 30 minutes. It's like, but he's basically saying he approves of this, right? And we give a discount to the senior staff of the archdiocese. We want them to come.
Mm-hmm. You've done to change directions here again.
Yeah.
You've done some fundraising to combat some of the issues in sex trafficking, things like that.
We have.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, fundraising that we get involved in is often for issues in the city that we think need to be highlighted, right? So, and a lot of it's on the back of the prayer breakfast. We'll have someone come in, like Wally Buono came, and he was amazing. And we tell people, just tell your story. Please don't evangelize. We had one of the founders of Nordstrom's come years ago. Just tell your story. Don't evangelize. Anyway, so what we do with the issues that we come across are issues of the city. They include sex trafficking, First Nations, nonprofits and how they struggle is a big issue. Research, right, which is happening at St. Paul's, but was also Julio Montana did research for the AIDS vaccine. Businesses. Michael O'Dane, as a person, models philanthropy. So when he was interviewed, for example, at the prayer breakfast, he talked about art, and he kind of was having fun saying, well, a lot of these things you always have social issues, but you have art. But what people don't know about him was the next day there was an open house where Michael O'Dane and Bob Lee's foundation built 172 units of condos for the needy in the heart of East Van. But he never talks about it. Yeah, he loves art, which is okay. Yeah. I'm sure, which is fun. But my point is, you have to you pick needs or situations where and then you can. I remember one year we started a thing, and Frank Justra, Angus Reid, John Mackay, I'm missing one. They started a thing called Backyard and Beyond, and they would send a letter out to their philanthropic friends, and we'd pick one issue in East Van before Christmas. Let's take Covenant House was one of them one year, and they help with kids and drugs. So then we talk about an international work that also works with kids that are in drugs and that need housing. And then we have Covenant House has to feed them, and then they talk about what they do, and then an international work comes that's Christian and says, here's what we do. And we do not allow a pitch. Take the material. You're talking to a wealthy crowd. Yeah. Take the material and do whatever you want, is what we do. But it was kind of fun. We did it for years.
And how effective do you find that when you don't do a pitch and you don't do an ask, let's say?
It depends the crowd. Real wealth doesn't need their arm twisted. They just need to feel compelled.
Right.
So
do they need to be asked, though?
Yeah. We say, we encourage you to support these.
Okay.
But we're not asking for you to give us a check to date. We don't want it.
Right.
Take this, read it, talk to your family, your foundations. We'll do whatever you want. Yeah. But we think they are worthy of consideration. And one was Salvation Army. They gave everybody egg salad sandwich. I thought, no one's ever going to come again. And then we had and they deal with people, a lot of people that are homeless and need to be fed or cared for. And World Vision came in and talked about how they do it internationally. Wow. And again, there's information to take with you. Yeah. We encourage you to consider being involved, but that's it in that crowd.
Right. In that crowd. So it's got to be event specific in terms of how
it can be or need specific, right? The sex trafficking is one of the major issues of British Columbia.
Yeah.
50% of all sex trafficking involves First Nation women in Canada. Yeah. So I help a foundation that does the strategic work, and they have hired First Nation women to start the work in Canada. They work with overseas, but they now do both. So sometimes it's topic driven. And that allows the passion to occur.
I have, I'm going to actually read this question.
Yeah.
This is one that we have written down here, and you've got some answers for this already. But how does Catholic education, particularly the focus on faith-based teachings and servant leadership, influence the initiatives you are involved in?
Well, I want to first say that Catholic education, if you study the history of the church, schools, the Jesuits have helped over 100 colleges worldwide. Schools and hospitals has been one of their foundational DNAs. That's what they do. And on the back of that, because I believe they do it, I believe that they do it because if you're reaching children, so there's your schools, and then you're also you are also helping people. Well, if you're helping people medically, you've incarnationally, sorry for the large word, are witnessing what Christ does. So I think the coin of the realm in the Catholic community is often the schools, right? Because they're the ones that stop, in a way, helping people pause, feel loved by word and deed, learn about a needy world. And these are all wonderful things. One of my closest friends, he wanted to get into oil PH because he liked my kids. He could have bought oil PH. So I got him in, and he had a couple of years, and it was his exposure to that. Then he's quite a committed Protestant, but his exposure to that rocked his world that his child had been helped. He went on and took his child to saints. But the story goes, then he ran into an event that he helped sponsor with Archbishop Miller at the Vancouver Club to talk about his life. He and Michael Leday and a couple others did it. But the thing about this person is he saw finally the quality necessary of the church, and he saw the need in the Catholic Church.
Right.
He is one of the two philanthropists that bankrolled the Divine Renovation, the founding of it.
Really?
Protestant. He's the largest donor of Alpha in the world.
Wow.
And when Archbishop Miller wanted to start Alpha, I get the note, and I said, don't have to look any further. This person loves who you are.
Yeah.
Invite him to lunch. And he sat down, we want to start this. And he just started.
Go.
So there's another thing. Get out of your ghettos. Catholics and Protestants have so much more in common, right? So I think, so adult education or Christian education or kids in school they are very powerful for cross-pollination. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that they're taught morals and ethics, they don't have to do whatever the day's issue is, right?
Yeah.
Right. And so one of my grandchildren is exceptionally gifted, goes to a gifted school, skipped grades already, and they had 2 or 3 months on the whole issue of pride, gay pride. Yeah. And he's a deep faith, though he's young, right? But his sister and his family are deeply committed Christians. And what I watched was, I said to him, well, here's what you should do, or I can do, as I'm going to call the school and say, well, if it's a big deal for 1% of society or 2% to go 3 months, 10% go to church, I would like 10% of the school's year focused on the faith of Christ.
Yeah.
Right. So I just think, and now he's saved a bit because of strong roots in the Catholic community, and he may end up in VC now. But my point is the Catholic community has, and again, I want to say it's as important as it is true to the witness of the Christian faith in word and deed, because everybody, including children, want to know what is the bottom line. And if we don't say it's who you are, not only what you do, it's who you are and how you live. And what the Catholic community does often in Vancouver, even at St. Mark's, is the head Jerry goes with a lot of Corpus Christi kids once a week to serve food at the door is open downtown, right? I have taken a fair share of unchurched people to there. They just, this happens. But I just think education of every kind And when you can build bridges with your bursaries and with your kids to understand the world and engage the world, and then bring speakers that have a faith but are really dive into medicine, or they really dive into some social cause. Okay,
Right.
they're seeing examples. That's all. And so have lay people, not professionals, come in, because they're what they're going to be. That's what these kids are going to be.
Right. Right.
None of that makes any sense.
Yes, no, it makes a ton of sense, And the idea, excuse me, of building servant leaders in our school to go out
Right.
and enter the world with a foundation of that's grounded in truth and faith is huge, because that
Massive.
and that's
Massive.
missing in today's world, when our teachers are, well, the schools they've become, they already are secular, and but they're indoctrinated with what our kids see on TikTok every day,
Right.
and there's no faith in that at all,
And there's no action. Have you seen the movie Chariots of Fire?
Yes.
Okay, the Chariots of Fire.
Many moons
a
ago,
friend of mine, one of my closest friends, in fact, I helped do his wedding. He was in the camp where Eric Liddell was, because Eric Liddell was a missionary who got put into the camp, and John is a Protestant, Cambridge, kind of born, I think, and bred to be an Anglican. Great guy. But anyway, the essence of the story is they were all there, Catholics, Protestants, missionaries, whatever. Now, what's interesting, watch how it has to be servant leadership. A lot of priests were there from Catholic churches. So when the Catholic Church was one of the first to negotiate getting them out, different groups left different times. And Eric Liddell died with a cerebral hemorrhage in the camp. And he was a Pied Piper, apparently. But I said to John, why? And people wept when the priest left. And why did they weep? They shared their food. And they dug the latrines. And they watched the witness of a leader, the servanthood of a leader.
Wow.
And it ricocheted throughout the camp. That's why we want our kids to dig the latrines of society, different things. But to me, those are these, and the servant leader is what Jesus was. I came to serve, right?
You just
So I think it models on his actions. So you're right on, spot on.
It's amazing, great words. Tom, thank you.
My pleasure.
For coming here today and for sharing your story with us and what you do. I'm very grateful for what you do in the city, with City in Focus.
Thank you.
Keep up the great work.
Thank you. And it's been a pleasure and a joy to do. And I wish you best of luck as you build the school and you get the finances that you need for all the bursaries that God puts in your lap.
Thanks. Well, I ask him to lead me where he needs me. So hopefully, and right now it's right here. So
yeah.
Thanks again.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you, everybody, for watching and for listening. Please be sure to subscribe, because we've got many episodes coming up as well. So with lots of good topics and lots of good company like Tom Cooper. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you. Enjoyed it. Appreciate it very much.
All right. Thank you for listening to Catholic Education Matters. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow the podcast on your favorite listening platform, rate it, and also leave a review. Don't forget to share this episode with your friends and family to help spread the word about the impact of Catholic education. Be sure to listen again.